Okay, I'm going to break this drawing down into steps that are way easier to follow than you might imagine, so that you can have a go, create this, and amaze yourself. Okay, so as explained in the intro, I'm going to break this down into steps so that you'll learn not only about the painting process and techniques, but also about the app that I'm using, Procreate. But that isn't to say you couldn't use a different app on a different tablet and still follow along. Having said that, within the app Procreate, I'm using their default A4 canvas, which if we go to the dimensions, is 297 by 210 millimeters and 300 dpi. I'm also using the color profile, the sRGB, the code that ends in 2.1. Again, here it's on the list within Procreate. In terms of the brushes, I'm only going to be using the default brushes that come within Procreate, so there's no need to download anything. I'm going to be using within inking the Studio Pen, within drawing the Evolve brush. Now I have amended it, but I shall show you how to do that when we get to that point. Within airbrushing, I'm going to use the soft brush, the medium brush and the medium hard brush, and within organic, the rainforest brush. In terms of the colors, I've already pre-selected a color palette here. Each of the colors, if we go to the value section within Procreate, you can see here there's a box called hexadecimal, and that is the code that is associated with the color. You can tap on it and you'll get a different code for each color. The codes for each of these colors is listed down in the video description, so you can just copy them one at a time and paste into this box. Press enter, the color appears up here, and then you can tap it into the empty color palette if you're creating it yourself. Or next to the color codes in the video description is a link that takes you to my Patreon page, where you can download the whole color file to save you some time. And that is completely free. But Patreon is the place that you can go and support this channel if you like the kind of content that I create. It's also where you can access exclusive content, such as extended versions of most of these tutorials. And I'd like to say a massive thank you to those people who do support me over at Patreon. It really has made a huge difference and continues to do so. So thank you so much. And with all of that said and done, we're going to get started. Okay, so the first thing on layer 1 is I'm going to go to the first color on the top row here. I'm going to drag from the color circle into the canvas and it will flood fill. Then I'm going to go back to the layers, click on the plus symbol, it creates a brand new layer, layer 2. I'd just like to say before we go any further, if your colors look a little bit different on your screen compared to the video you're watching on my screen, then don't worry, my camera just tends to adjust the colors slightly, so don't worry too much if they look a little bit different. As long as you've downloaded the color palette or got the color codes that I provided, you are using the correct colors, so don't worry. I'm going to go to the second color on the top row. I'm going to go in with the soft brush with an airbrushing. I'm going to put it maybe about 7% and maybe about 30% strength, and just about a third of the way down, not halfway, further up from halfway. Bring some of this in from here. Just tap it in subtly, softly. Maybe we could turn it up even higher, 20%, and then just shut down some of that brightest pink at the very top, and at the sides a little bit more, just a few taps in and around those areas. Put it back down again, 7% size again. Just circle it in a little bit. We're just building it up at these edges, shutting down some of the light at the sides. It's a very light color, so it's not too impactful just yet. And then as we come down into this lower third, we don't want any of that light pink, so we can start to introduce some darker sense of it anyway. So you can see we've got a lighter area here, and just in this general area, it's pretty subtle though. So we'll go to our layers, create a new layer, layer 3. We'll go to our colors, we'll go to the third color on the top row. Stick with a soft brush with an airbrushing, same brush, put it down slightly, maybe 5% size, still 30% strength. And then now within this, we can start to bring in just some taps, create some kind of just blobs really, bring it further down. Bring it over here. Have it cut across all the way. Just at this point, that's just underneath halfway. Bring that all the way across. Again, nothing overly challenging about the forms that we're creating so far. We will go to our layers, create a new layer, tap on the little N on the layer, scroll down to add, and that's changed the blend mode. I'm going to go in with the yellow, 9th color. I'm going to go in with the medium hard brush, going to put it to 9% size, 100% opacity, and then just maybe slightly off from center and around there. Just tap it a few times and we can create our sun. And that works quite nicely color-wise. Go back to layer 3. Go back to the soft brush with an airbrushing. Back to our colors. Third color again. And I think now that we've got the sun and we can actually see how it relates to other things, I think I want more of a band of cloud that maybe goes at the top half. So we'll just go in, build bits of cloud that just cuts over the sun in many ways, but above it, clips the top half of that sun. I think that would be quite an interesting way of having the two elements collide. Then I'm going to go back to layer 4, which has the blend mode to add. I'm going to go in with the orangey red color, which is the 8th color on the top row. I'm going to put it down maybe to 3% size and pretty low on the opacity, maybe only about 5%. And then I can just start to bring the glow of the sun into those cloudy areas a little bit more. See on the lower half of that little bank of cloud, bring it in across there and maybe above it as well. Again, we're just spreading that kind of glow. Maybe just go around the edges of the sun. Just circle around it a little bit. And then this way, tap it in. I like it to be a little bit random. And this way, go above it a little bit. Up here, scroll out, zoom out rather. Up here. Okay, we'll come back to the sky. We're going to keep the image as streamlined as possible. So go to our top layer and create a new layer above that, layer 5. And I'm going to go to the medium brush with an airbrushing. I'm going to use the 4th color on the top row, first row, 5% size, 100% opacity, and then we're going to have a section underneath where the sun is by a good margin. Doesn't have to be a straight line. Do a band of that across. I suppose we could just drag to that lower area. It flood fills it apart from that little anomaly. We can just go and color over that. And then I'm going to go on the same layer to the drawing evolve brush. Now on the evolve brush, I've gone, tap on it, go into the settings. The stroke path spacing I've changed to 50% and click done. I'm going to put the size of that brush to 2% and 100% opacity. And I can zoom in. And then it's just textured enough. It just has some separation. I'm going to have some trees, some distant trees that have got snow on them. And so when you get this snow kind of collecting on the trees, you get just made up of blobs seemingly in the distance. So you can start with a sense of the general kind of tree trunk perhaps, and then just push it left and right until it all collects like that. Now the brush is pressure sensitive, so if you press on hard, you get much bigger shapes. You press on lightly, you get smaller. So press lightly at the top, and then as you come down, you can just rock it left to right, and you start to fill in the rest of the tree details. Another one, just press lightly, and then you can go back in, press left and then right, left and then right. You start to get almost a sense of kind of branches, but it doesn't have to be particularly detailed for the distance. I'm going to do this pretty much all the way across. Just takes a few minutes. Shouldn't take too long. Maybe some smaller ones that are just poking up there. I mean, if you do this on a separate layer, so we go to our layers and create a new layer, layer 6, and I'll start this over here as well. Maybe some slightly taller ones even. Zoom in, rock from left to right. And this is perhaps a bigger one, so I'm taking a little bit more care of it. Thinking about the gaps, definitely want some gaps in that. It doesn't want to be, you know, just a dead shape really with no light able to get through. Keep it a little bit patchier than that. Maybe just press on a bit more lightly. Push it left to right. And then it will just start to blot together, push together as we get lower down. So maybe do one or two of these. I'm going to keep these two separately and I'll show you why. Okay, so now we've got two useful tree shapes. We can go to that layer, slide and duplicate it, go to the transform, and then we could just move it somewhere else, maybe to disguise the fact that we've cloned it. Flip it horizontally. If it leans, just rotate it. It's on freeform, so you can squash it down, put it over there. You don't want to do that too many times, but if it helps just speed the process a little bit, that's fine. spending the time to get every tree a little bit different is worth that extra few minutes. So I'm just going to whiz through these now. I'm going to create a nice sort of horizon of trees that are in the distance. And some shorter ones that maybe just cut up and are just about visible there too. We may have this as a background layer yet and do some more in front of these, so let's see. Leave some of them maybe a bit more sparse at the top. It's okay to have them, in fact, beneficial to have them quite different in character a little bit. And we are going to have some that just cut in front of that sun as well. And it's the wrong colour now, but it doesn't matter. We're just getting this as a kind of template or footprint for where the trees are going to be in a really dramatic, really simple way so you can actually see them. And then we're going to use some of the tools to actually soften these in a little bit. But we'll start with a really dramatic, dark colour to begin with. So I have it cutting in front of that sun. I want the bottom of the sun just to be clipped away by the tops of trees. Just carefully do those because obviously this is where the eye is going to be drawn most. So just a little bit of care with those ones, and then yeah, they all sort of join together and we can bring them down and then be a little bit more free at the bottom. And that's generally how I'm treating all of these trees. Just be a little bit careful at the top, come down, and then yeah, just scribble it in. So now I've shown you that area and some of the general sense of it. I'm just going to whiz across, finish all of that area. Maybe some of the in-betweens can just be almost just the tree trunks, just quite skinny trees and nothing much more than that, and that's fine. Again, change up the height of these. They don't all want to be exactly the same. If you're going to run across the horizon line of that distant trees and they all look exactly the same, it's going to look pretty boring. So vary them up in height, maybe width, and density of foliage as well. Okay, once we've done those across that area, I'm going to go to the airbrushing medium brush, 100% opacity and maybe 5% size, and just go in, fill any of those little gaps in that we don't want. When they get lower down, we don't really want those little gaps. Then I'm going to go to layer 5. I'm going to go to the adjustments. I'm going to go to the Gaussian blur, zoom in so you can see its impact. I'm going to slide that across to maybe just into the 2%, and even within the 2%, just like with the brush size on this slider, the 2% has quite a variation to it as well. So just about halfway on the 2%, deselect, and just softens them slightly. I'm going to go to the layer, tap on it and put on the alpha lock. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush, and I'm going to go to the 5th color on the top row. I'm going to put the size at maybe 5% and about 20% strength opacity. And then we're just going to begin by softening it at the top. Bring that all the way across. Maybe if you go to the side, maybe you can put it up slightly more, 10%, and you can just run across the top line of those trees. And we can bring it down slightly. Definitely want the top to be softened in. And then you can see there's a section there that we've also brought it a little bit further down. And then we also have the ability to go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and blur that in as well. So it softens and transitions that a little bit better. So about 20%. Deselect, zoom in, and we're going to soften it, make it even brighter in color. So I'm going to go to the next color, which is the 6th color. I'm going to do basically the same again, but this time I'm going to turn it back down again, 5% size. Let's turn it up 30% strength, just where it starts to collide with the sun. Especially, it needs to be some warmer colors, but not just there. I think perhaps uniformly. Across that whole area, pretty much. But yeah, more dramatically when it gets towards the sun. Go to the next color, the 7th color, and use some of that here as well. Make sure to get the top areas. And then again, we can go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and again, we can blur that in. Maybe not quite as much this time, 15%, deselect. Then I'm going to create a new layer, layer 6. I'm going to change the blend mode, tap on the N, put it on the add blend mode again, tap on the layer, put on the clipping mask, which puts a little arrow that links it to this layer. So if we add another color now, perhaps you can't see that unless I turn the opacity up. Add another layer, it will stop at the edges of the layer underneath it, which is really useful. We don't want that bright yellow, however. I'm going to go in with the 8th color, go in with a soft brush, turn it way down, so maybe 5% opacity and maybe 4% size. And then we can just go in here and just, certainly where the sun is, it's going to bleach out some of that color, at least a little bit in and around there. It becomes almost like a fireball where there's the sun. It really should glow, and it's not adding it to anywhere else. You can tap anywhere else you like in the sky. It isn't gonna, it's just changing the top of these trees and only slightly. That just blends in a little bit better. I think I might just go back to layer 3 and I'm going to go in with a strong color. So maybe the, go back a color, maybe the 7th color. Still with the soft brush. 4% size is still fine, but maybe just maybe 10% strength. I think I'd like to increase some of the strength of this color just in this area. I think to have a slightly stronger pink, warmer, more intense colors here is just going to blend it all together a little bit better. I think I'm enjoying that combination of colors a bit more now. Bring some intensity in there. Maybe just extend that up a little bit into other areas. The edges of some of these purple clouds. Go over the whole area a little bit and zoom out. And I think that is binding them together much better. So let's put that up to 10%. I didn't quite get there. 8% is fine actually in this lower area. Again, this is background to the trees. Sometimes you can't see the effect of something until you've done layers in front and then you have to go backwards. That's all part of the process. It's perfectly normal. And then we'll go back to layer 5 and we may just go back in and darken some of these back up. So we can go to the 5th color, stick with the soft brush with an airbrushing, maybe go to 20% opacity, 5% size. Maybe just one or two of these. Don't want to be quite so pink. Bring out some of that cooler color again by contrast. Sometimes you have to push it a little bit too far to realize. That's fine. We're just reclaiming it, bringing it back. Want it to be a little bit more of a dark contrast now. I don't care about the blending in here too much. It's not that crucial. I just want to get these effects of these trees better. I think that's starting to really bind it together and work in a way that's much more pleasing. I like that. We'll take that whole layer and we'll slide and we'll duplicate it. And maybe the bottom version will go to the transform, flip it horizontally, and then you can move it around. You can see its impact. We don't really want it in the center, but that's fine. Just leave it there. We'll go back to the layer, tap on the N, and just dial it back. And you can see it without and you can see it with. I'm going to put it to about 60% strength. Back to the transform. And just drag it down. And you can see it when you drag it down completely off there. And then creep it back up again a little bit. And it subtly is having an impact. Creates a bit more layer. Perhaps even tap on the N and just dial it back even more. Maybe about 40%. And untick it. Put it back on. And it is subtly there. Might just shorten them even more. Put them up up and then squish them. And then just one or two areas now, you're starting to see them just creating a bit more depth. We don't want them near the sun, so we're going with the eraser, medium hard brush, 100%. And we're just anything there, we're just going to remove that. And anything you don't like, if it's just a bit clumsy in one or two areas, you can delete it. But I think it benefits subtly in just one or two areas. I think it creates a little bit more depth, which is useful. Okay, we're going to go to our top layer and create a new layer above that, layer 8. Go to my colors. I'm going to use the first color on the second row. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing medium brush, 3% size, 100% opacity, and we're just going to start having an area back here of some snow. That is going to be the first sort of layer of land forward from the trees. We don't want it to be a straight line. I've not done the hold to snap to a straight line feature. I want to keep it quite lumpy. I think it's better that way. And then going to go to the organic rainforest brush. Now tap on there. I've gone to the stroke path and spacing and put it at 40% on the slider. Click done. Same color, 1% size, maybe 30% strength, and zoom in. And then we can just create some separation back here so it doesn't just come to a completely dead end, maybe higher on that 1%. Go along the edge just so it softens in slightly. It doesn't need to be quite as brutally, quite as much of a dead stop. Put it up to 2% size, just soften that in a little bit with a bit more texture, but I really don't want that to be overly textured. Just one or two areas perhaps. You can add a hint of it just going back there a little bit, but not too much. And then I'm going to go to the fifth color. I'm going to go in with a medium brush with an airbrushing, 2% size, 20% strength. And then just back here, we're going to start to bring in some bits of texture in the snow, just some dashes, some dots. Try to keep it kind of roughly going sideways. Don't need to do too much of this though, however. We just don't want it to look too flat. Perhaps a little bit lower down, we can start to add some trees. So we'll turn this down even further, 1%, maybe 30% strength. Then we can have some trees maybe in this area. They just don't have any foliage. Can be cutting up. So not evergreen trees, these ones, they're just a bit of variety of tree type. Just about changing up the textures really so they can cut in front of what we've already created. You might want to zoom in just to make sure that you're getting these shapes how you like. Now I'm using the airbrush just because it's a little bit softer. We do have the option of something like the inking studio pen, but it's a little bit too harsh, as you can see. I mean, it's an option, you could turn it down on the percentage, but it's just a little bit difficult. It's very crisp. You could perhaps use this for, you know, some of the ends of some of the branches. If you really wanted to make it something, you could zoom in to the nth degree, but I'm just going for the overall look, so I'm going to stick with the airbrushing medium brush. My tutorials are much more impressionistic. We go for something that kind of binds together and looks quite realistic often, but it's about achieving it in ways that don't require spending 100 hours just fine-tuning every little branch and every little detail. It's about creating the effect as efficiently as we can, often going for realism without having to spend an age to create it. So we don't need to do too many of these necessarily. Maybe one or two, could just be a little bit taller. They're not going to be in the main trees. We've still got some really big trees to go yet, but these are just added into the mix. A bit of a change of texture almost. Mainly kind of background features for the most part. We may come back to that if there's a need to, but I'm going to keep moving forward. And go to my layers, create a new layer, layer 9. Going with the medium brush with an airbrushing still. I'm going to use that first colour on the second row again. I'm going to put it to maybe 10% size and 100% opacity. I'm just going to have it a section of land that cuts up here. Now you're not going to be able to see the colour difference, but we are going to just have it cutting down under here, underneath everything we've just added. So you'll know if you've gone over it because it obscures what you've just done. So you want to go all the way up to it without covering up what you've just created. But we do want it to sort of bank up either side like this. Now if it covers it slightly just as it banks up over at this edge, that is fine too. Maybe a bit more of a lump there, and then similar over here. And then we can just fill it in for the bottom area. Already it's looking quite pleasing as a scene, but we've not finished yet. I'm going to go to that layer, tap on it and put on the alpha lock. I'm then going to go to the third color on the second row. I'm going to go in with the medium brush still, with an airbrushing. I'm going to put it down to maybe 4% size, not quite 100, maybe 80% strength, opacity, and just carefully start to come in here and bring out that edge. Now you'll start to see whether it's working or not as an edge. You may need to go in there and just adjust it, and that's fine too. Now I just want the flat area here, rather than it climbing up the edges. I just want to create a flat area here, and maybe you can go back to the layer now, tap on it, turn off the alpha lock, and just with an even smaller brush, 2%, just be very deliberate about that edge. And just be very specific about it, like that. And that's obviously the light of the sun impacting on the snow and create that really nice warm hue. And we can alternate between those two different colors. So we can bring it in from that edge, have a bit of sun that's just coming in, maybe creeping up the side of that mound a little bit, and then joining in the area where most of the sun is impacting. Maybe another section over here again, just lightly press, bring it in. Maybe it comes in bands. Maybe there's sort of like undulations in the snow. And then it comes and sort of flattens out in this central area. Create a bigger area. And I put it at 80% because you can see it's starting to create kind of different tones of that pink, which is useful. We don't want it all to be exactly the same. Maybe turn it down even more, 50%. As it comes over here, it's just starting to lose some of its impact. Press lightly, let it fade out there a little bit. Now, whenever it appears, I want it to be quite a distinct edge. I don't think it's going to be too fuzzy. It's not going to really soften in too much. I want it to be quite stark, the difference between the blue and the pink. So I'm going to go back to the first blue, still with the medium brush, 2% size, maybe 100% opacity even. And we're just going to come back into here. And again, it's land that undulates, so it might just be that you get a bit that turns away from the sun, and this is now a shadow. So even though the general area is impacted by the sun, you're just going to get little bits that just fold away from pointing directly at that sun. You get these nice sort of variations in hue. Turn it down even more, lower on that 2%. Maybe just get some little bits, little areas that are kind of separate, and sort of generally join over here. And there's no exact combination of shapes that is going to be the answer here. So you can have fun and just create your own little bumps and things that jut out and stick up, whatever you think works. Maybe you could have a rock here, for example, and we'll go in and add some dark colours for that. As a shadow to match. Some little bits of things that are poking through or fall into the snow, or could even do a sense of footprints from an animal. Paw prints rather, or even human footprints, why not? You can choose. Okay, we might come back to that and just define that a little bit more clearly, but for now that's a start. So we'll go to our layers, create a new layer, layer 10. I'm going to do some trees over at this side first, so I'm going to go in with the inking studio pen. I'm going to put it up to 20% size, 100% opacity, and I'm going to go in with the dark colour. So I'm going to use the 6th colour on the second row, and I'm going to do a tree trunk here, and it goes behind the mound, kind of, and another one, just get the pressure right at the very top. It comes down and then sort of hits the ground here-ish. And again, we can kind of obscure and blend in the point at which it makes contact. And then we're going to have some branches. They don't all have to be consistent. use that pressure sensitivity, and they don't all have to be uniformly the same. They could be quite random. Maybe some of the bigger ones, as we get lower down, start to have the effects of gravity. Maybe they're bigger, so therefore they're heavier, and they're getting dragged more downwards. Maybe they've got snow and foliage that is just changing the way that they lean, so they lean more straight down. Like this. And it's a pretty raggedy looking tree, and that's absolutely fine too. I'm going to add foliage to it in addition to this, and snow. I don't want them. What you don't really want is a tree with branches that kind of are too neat and line up with each other. I think slightly more random is going to be a better look. Once we've done that, perhaps then we can go in with the, well, it might be better to go in with the organic rainforest brush. Got it at 40% spacing, and then low on that 2% size, maybe 90% strength, not quite 100. And well, we can start to build it in and around the branches that we've got. Start to add some weight, some mass, and that could be a combination of snow and the needles, the foliage, actual natural foliage of the tree, and then snow in addition to that. And we can just use these, put them together, and create quite a pleasing effect quite quickly and quite easily. Again, most of the methods that I'm showing you are designed to be efficient, to not be overly labor intensive, to be kind of fun, to create an effect without all of the anguish and labor intensive kind of parts of it. Although I do welcome people to spend longer if that's what you want to do. If you want to spend a longer time than I'm showing you, come up with an even better look, more refinement, then I'll be absolutely delighted to see the results of those. On that front, there are links in the video description to a Facebook group where you can post your results, and there's also my Instagram. You can follow me, tag me, and I do usually get to see them. I don't always get a chance to respond to every single one, but I do notice them. I do scroll through. I do my best when I've got the time. Keep zooming in and out of your image. You can see its impact. Maybe as it gets lower down, it just starts to shut down more of the background light that can come through. You don't see the colours coming through anymore. And you can see it's quite a nice overall impact effect. Move on to this one. Do something similar. Just scribble it all in at the base of the tree. You're not going to see much coming through. Maybe turn it down slightly lower, 1% even. Just scribble it in and around some of those branches. Leave some gaps where you don't really add very much. Some more blobs. Some of the technique to the background is that now we have branches that pins it all together. So it does look a bit more coherent. We'll go and create a new layer, layer 11. Tap on it and put on the clipping mask, which means that anything again is going to be restricted. It's only going to be in the shapes that we've already created there, which can be quite useful. Just in terms of speed and efficiency, you can just scribble over an area. It just really lightens it up. Now don't be respectful of the tree trunk. Go over it, put in front of it with some of the snow detail. Imagine the snow sort of landing in areas it's not going to respect the branches or the tree trunk. It's just going to obscure it. It's going to settle and rest wherever it can. Might create a new layer on top of that, and in addition to that we can push it a little bit further. So that just got us most of the way quite quickly, but we've got it at 1% size, 100% opacity, and we can just keep adding bits of snow, keep adding to the foliage. I think maybe I prefer it as a general without the clipping mask. It means you can just add, keep building it up, and we'll do the same over on this tree, so maybe turn it down even more, low on that 1%, just so we can bring out some of the shapes of branches. We don't want to lose them completely. We can trace along the edge, top edge of the branches. Scribble it in. It's really quite an easy rough process. Maybe we can go in with something like the airbrushing soft brush as well. Put it down to 1% size, 100% opacity even, and we can just really concentrate some of this in places, put some points in there, scribble in some extra blobs, just so the snow looks a little bit heavier, less textured, denser. Maybe the combination of the two is the answer. Sometimes brushes on their own don't do the full job, and you just need to try out other brushes with them, and then it's the two together that actually creates the best effect. And I do think that actually the rainforest brush is great, but then just this brush mixed in with it just really adds that necessary density to the snow that is missing from the rainforest brush. I think that's looking better. And we could also go down now with that soft brush, turn the opacity down, maybe 30%, turn the size up to higher on the 2%, and we can just go into these areas now. I'm going to get just some slightly shadowier bits. Don't need to overdo that, but just there will be some hint of shadow, darker areas just there. Blend it in. Move over to this side. We're going to do some really nice prominent trees here as well. This time I'm going to use this really dark colour, which is the 8th colour on the second row. Again, going with the inking studio pen, 20% size, 100% opacity. I'm going to get a really nice prominent tree in here now. This is the tree that's probably the most important one. Whoops, don't hold it till it snaps. That's not really what we want. And, well, I'll add some branches, but I don't intend these branches to be too visible. I'm just using them as a guide. I kind of want to obscure these branches for the most part, but useful in terms of direction, I suppose. Then I'm going to go straight in with the organic rainforest brush once more. Low on that 2% size, 100% opacity, zoom in. And again, in fact, what I'd like to do with that brush is just slide and reset it this time, so it's clumped together that little bit more. 2% size, 100% opacity. And I think that's going to be more useful for this tree if we want it to be just squashed together as a texture a bit more. I might even put it down to the 1%. And so the same brush, change the settings, just becomes different and useful in quite a different way. If you want to subtly change up the texture, and yet something like changing the spacing can be super useful. It's amazing how versatile and actually how great the Procreate brushes are if you just dig into them a little bit and just push them around, see what happens. There's a lot that can be done. So I'm just bringing that general shape with the branch, but it is, for this tree, much more obscuring the actual branches. It's a really kind of densely foliated, densely packed tree. So in addition to the main branch that's like this, and then thinking about other kind of foliage that just circulates it. So I'm almost treating every branch in a similar method to the trees that were in the background, really. So it has that kind of fractal thing going on. So every branch now is like one of the trees of the background. And then obviously we can add more branches or foliage whenever we feel. We don't have to be restricted to the branches that we've added initially. We can add more. We can still leave some gaps. We can still have a general sense that we've got some areas where it clumps together more, and then there's more gaps in other areas. Trees will often be quite lopsided or asymmetrical. They are just organic, obviously, and respond to their environment. If their environment dictates, goes more in one area rather than others, the environment can create all sorts of more random things. So let's create something that seems like it's responded to its environment. And just a little bit of randomness here and there, so it's not completely even. We do get some gaps that run through, perhaps this tree, so we can see the tree trunk and go over the tree trunk. Doesn't matter, the brush is different. Let's bring it down. Maybe we can start on the ground. There's going to be lots of branches that just collide with the ground here. It's only when you start to come up a little bit that you start to see those branches swinging out. And again, it's very densely packed near the base of the tree, just like pretty much all the other trees that we've done in this scene. You can circle it in to get those denser areas. And really, most of the more refined shapes were kind of for the outer edges, really. As soon as you get into the kind of central areas, you can be much more free and scribble it in. And again, we've got more opportunities to add to this texture with the snow and other colours. Once we've got our main shape in there, we have to decide whether you're happy with it. Maybe if you're not happy with some of it, you can go in with the eraser. Put the eraser on the rainforest brush even. Turn it down to a suitable size, 2%, 100% opacity. And if you wanted to go in there and just eat away at some of the texture, obviously you can't get rid of the tree trunk, you can't take it to that degree. But if you want to get rid of any of the areas, make them slightly less densely populated, and you could go back in there and do things like that quite easily. Combination between adding and also taking away. So back in with the brush. You decide exactly what your tree shape needs to be. There's no right and wrong. There's only what you feel looks right. Okay, so once you've got this main tree shape in, we're only going to tap on it and put on the alpha lock. Maybe go to the 9th colour. And with the same brush, same setting, so I'd love just moved it 1% size or high on the 1%, 100% opacity is fine. And then we can just start to gradually bring in a sense of lines that sweep in here, create, well, I guess a sense of highlights, but it could be the snow too. And you don't need to necessarily decide which it is. It doesn't really matter. You can have a combination of snow or the highlights of the foliage. Just going to scribble it in a bit more randomly at the top. You know, random can be really good, but then as we get down, we can almost have a randomness that then becomes following the top edge of the shapes as well. So it's a directed scribble. It's not completely random. Leave some gaps where there are gaps. Scroll out, zoom out, see what it looks like. Again, just do that rocking left to right. Perhaps turn it up 2%. Don't densely pack it in too much. Keep it a little bit random. And then in a moment, we'll go in with the airbrush. We'll do it now. We'll go in with the airbrushing soft brush. Lower that 2% size. And I'm going to put it up to 100% opacity. And again, we can just create those more dense shapes. Really focus on the top surfaces where you think the snow would collect. In fact, I'm going to go to that layer, turn off the alpha lock now. And that allows me to just create some of the more of these round kind of blob formations that would collect on that top, be a little denser, more like the round shapes that is like pillowy and soft, but actually quite dense too. And that's how snow kind of forms. I think the soft airbrush is quite a useful brush for adding this to this. And again, we can cut it in front of the tree trunk. I'm imagining it just on the top surface of branches. Just to kind of picture it that way, I think is useful, because you will tend to just, if you understand the way you're thinking about it, you will be more likely to put it onto the form in a way that corresponds with the way you're thinking about it. I feel like I want to go in there again with the organic rainforest brush, really low on that size, 1% size and 100% opacity, and just swing some of the branches upwards again a little bit. I think some of the initial shape that I wanted has got a little bit lost. Swing some of these up. I think I liked that general upward swing to some of those branches, so you can go in there and just reclaim them. I think it looks a bit more elegant with that shape in there, just subtly. Go backwards a colour to the 7th, go back in with the airbrushing soft brush, and it's a lighter shade that will just stick out a bit more. Turn that down, 1% size. And it is just a note lighter. That can be quite useful for bringing out almost a sense of highlights. Don't need to do too much of that. I might do something similar with trees here as well. So keep on a separate layer, layer 13. I'm going to go in with the inking studio pen, do a couple of smaller ones. In fact, we need to change colour. We need to go to the 6th colour, a couple of trees here, maybe just one over here. And then I'm not going to spend as long on these ones, so I'm going to go in with the organic rainforest, 2% size, 100% opacity, and I'm just going to try to get these in a little bit more speedily, much more closely similar to the approach of the background trees. I think the eye is going to be drawn to this one more anyway. These are just going to be more peripheral. They don't need as much care and attention. It's amazing what your eye will trick yourself into accepting. If there's something with more detail, the background areas aren't as important. Right, I'll go to the 9th colour, and then we'll just vary that up with some variation of tone as well. Keep it quite patchy. Some blobs in some areas, but uneven. And then we can just generally tap some different colours in here as well. Now we're just going to do some foreground details. So I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer, layer 14. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing medium brush, in fact no, the medium hard brush. I'm going to go to the black colour, or the darkest colour, which was the 8th colour on the 2nd row. I'm going to put it to 2% size and 60% strength. And then maybe I'll just bring in, tap in some darker tones in here. That could be a collection of rocks, debris, things that are just collecting. Might turn up to 100% actually, just speed this up a little bit. We can soften this in with the paler colours. So again, just allow this to collect as a shape. Turn it down, lower on the 2%. I did say a rock feature here, so let's go for that. And again, we can soften that in with the blue once more. Maybe a couple of things in here, which again, we can obscure with more snow. So it doesn't matter if it's too much to begin with. Easy enough to soften it in. Some extra things back here. And just like I was saying, I can go in with the 1st colour. We'll go in maybe with a soft brush, 2% size, maybe 50% strength. And as I was saying, you can go in and you can soften its impact. I'm going to turn that down 1%. You can just create a sense that it's a little bit more buried. So whatever it is, you know, you're just reducing the top edge. Tap in some snow, and then the bottom edge, probably just go over that a few times so it just kind of makes it look more buried. Perhaps put it up to 100% actually, just for that bottom edge, so it softens it in. Back down again, 50% or so, and then we can just tap in some snow that's collected on the top. And that does quite a lot for conveying that really. And then we can go over here, 100% for the bottom, same for over here. As it pushes in, it just clips the bottom of it a little bit more. And then lower on that percentage, 50% or so for the top, and you can just tap in some textures where it's just a bit more subtle on the very top. And then one over here, 100% for the bottom, 50% or so for the top edge, and just tapping around that top edge so you're just softening its impact. Stay on that same layer. I'm going to go for a darker blue, which is the 2nd colour on the 2nd row. Stay with the soft brush, 3% size, maybe 70% strength, and well, we can have some variations in the snow as well. Maybe in and around the rocks, for example. Or just more generally, just introduce some variation. We can take it up to near where some of these trees are, and it stops it looking quite so flat. Maybe turn it up 5%. Bring a sweep of this across. Again, it just gives it a bit more life. Turn it down 2%. Bring it in from those edges. Maybe a bit of a shadow area behind the tree. Makes sense. Maybe just a bit of more of a rock formation here. So I'm going to go to the first color again. Go in with the medium brush, 100% opacity, 4% size. Maybe just create some sharper edges for things that are just here. Again, we can go into that pink area and just, or the highlighted area, and just refine some of that if we want to. Go in with the black, the 8th color, same brush, turn it down, 1% size, 100% opacity, and, well, I can just, without any of the fuss of the other techniques, just start to add some black straight in there, and then perhaps go to the second color, and again, maybe similar size brush. Again, mix this in. And straight away, those combinations of those two different colors create the sense that there's maybe a rock or something there. Turn it up on that 2%. Create some more disruption there. And we can pepper in bits of that black wherever we feel. Perhaps I'll go in with the soft brush for this. Low on that 2% and maybe 50% strength. And anywhere we feel, I'm going to go really low on that 1%, in fact. So it's quite subtle. Anywhere they just want to pepper in some variation in the snow, then you can go ahead and do that. Break it up. If it's looking too monotonous, too similar, not enough texture and variation, you can go in there anywhere around the scene and just refine and improve. Add some more texture. Last couple of touches, 4th colour on the second row, still with the soft brush, 1% size, 50% strength, and maybe just, we're going to get some variation in that pink to bits as well. Just cutting through here, some variation. Does make sense to have that variation in pink, and there you go. I'm going to leave this tutorial here at this point. I hope you've enjoyed following along. I'm going to push this further over at my Patreon, so within a few days there'll be in the comments section a pinned link that takes you to my Patreon, the exact place where you can follow along with this and become a patron. Thanks so much for watching. Please remember to hit subscribe, it really helps out the channel, and I hope to see you back here soon. Bye for now.